Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I hope that you can hear me okay.
Hi, everyone.
You can. I'm testing myself. Okay. Hi, welcome. So I have a pretty long presentation to get into tonight. The topics I'm going to be covering is, we'll be discussing and debating. Was Jeff Lacasse set up? And it's Lacasse, not Lacoste. I was calling him Lacoste for years, but it's Lacasse. And I still hear other people pronounce it that way as well. So just it's Lacasse. And you can actually hear when Georgia and Wendy, or when Wendy's on the stand, you can hear Georgia keep saying Lacasse, but then every time Wendy answers, she says Lacoste. Georgia says Lacoste and Wendy says Lacasse. So you can hear her, and she's not correcting her, but she's pronouncing it correctly. So we're going to talk about whether he was set up, and then I'm going to talk about the 3 trips to Tallahassee, specifically in relating to the cars. Now, I just re-released a very long, very detailed live stream that I did in the past. I think it had like 30,000 views or something, about the June and the July trip, which are pretty detailed, and I pull up tons of receipts and go over them. So I just released that. And then I think I released the rental properties, or the Adelson properties and how they had moved over the years in relation to the timeline of this murder and after. So those are 2 things, but I just want to say hi to everybody. And then there was something that was released today by Tonka's 2 cents. And I shared it in a post, and I actually saw it on Reddit first, but I was not aware of this creator, or if I was, I had forgotten in my hiatus. And she actually went and I guess did a FOIA request to get the body cam video of what we know is the medical emergency that Donna Adelson went through on her transport from Miami to Tallahassee. And it seems like she was in the same clothes at which she was arrested in. So that was interesting because we know that she had been in Miami for a few days. Because remember, we saw her in that turtle suit at her first appearance down in Miami. So I was just play a little bit of it just, for fun and just to get everybody warmed up before I get into the presentation. It's just a fun little thing to get into. I have it pulled up for you guys. One moment. And I'm just going to play a little bit because it just, I don't know if she's really having a medical emergency. I think that anything that Donna does is dramatized, maybe like 30 or 40% above an average reaction people would have, as we've witnessed from our bond hearing. And she didn't get her Band-Aid. That was a huge tragedy. And the fact that she can't sleep because it's so loud and all the bangs, but at the same time, she complains about not being able to hear anything because her ear canals are all stuffed up with wax. She's walking contradictions, but I just wanted to show you this because it's just something to behold. And I'll start it out by showing she's getting some water, and it really brings you back to her arrest. You got the whole gerbil type water feeding here. So let's just go ahead and get to it.
Take time. You want some more water? You think you might be able to use the rest? You think that might help?
Like that arm.
Go ahead and tell them that miss from out check out.
That's
We're going to check out. You're going to have your miss come and check you out. Okay, Adelson. Yes, ma'am. I don't want nothing to happen to you. I want to make sure you're all right. I don't know what's going on right now. Are you familiar? Have you ever felt like this before, ma'am? This is just from the uncomfortable ride.
Communicate, but I was calling.
Okay.
He goes, I was calling and nobody answered. Like the Band-Aid. She kept wanting that Band-Aid.
And if you step outside, that'll help. You don't know? Okay. All right. You stick your leg out? Is that a possible? Okay.
Maybe just for a little bit more. Get more water. Durable. That's right, things will.
No, she said she's not cold. Okay. She just had this hand just kind of locked up on it. Okay. For no reason, but they kind of loosen it up.
Oh my God. Oh my God. The shaking seems a little exaggerated, but what do I know? This could be legit.
You want to try to drink some more water? No?
No.
Okay.
Okay, now it's her being in the it's gone quiet, but it's her getting taken by ambulance. So anyway, I just want to give a shout out to the person who got and posted this. It's called Tonka's 2 cents. So much credit to her. Thank you for doing that and for sharing this. And well done. That's awesome. So, okay, I just want to go back to the presentation. That was an unexpected surprise. Really, really something. It did not disappoint. It did not disappoint. Yeah. Yeah, I think it could be withdrawal and then just, exacerbated by just her natural personality. I mean, we saw her doing some of this on the stand with the hand shaking. It was much more refined and more court appropriate, but that's why I really do think there's going to be some sort of medical emergency at some point during the trial. And I don't know if it's going to be during Wendy's testimony. I don't know if it's going to be when the verdict is read. I don't know if it's going to be something else that it's unforeseen, but I think we're going to I think it's going to be quite a show. I think there's something very dramatic that's going to be happening. And I hope that I'm there and able to witness it in person. But that was really something. Yep. So that is the name of the person who posted it. So go check out the channel. I put a post of it on my channel, so you can just click and go right to the channel and watch it and subscribe if you want. Oh, I'm butchering your name. Is it Ryan? Is it Tanika? My bad. Okay, so let's get into it. I have a lot of video B-roll to play here as well. So let's bear with me. I hope everything works. But yeah, I wanted to get in, to discuss, was he set up? And I know a lot of people think he was and he wasn't. And it is a debate to be had. So let's walk through it. Here it is. It's Tunica. Okay. My bad. Yeah, Wendy's got to show her the acting skills. All right. So just updates and new filings. We learned that some of the deadlines for discovery and the depots would be pushed back, I think, until mid-April. And I'll update that on the next screen, or the next live stream when things are more solidified, because normally the court will reissue new dates and they'll put everything out in a clean, nice one-sheeter, and I'll share that when that becomes available. And in yesterday's hearing, we heard Zellman say that he intended to, in very short order, he would be filing the motion that about the change of venue. They, as you know, they had an expert that was going to put together a bunch of stuff, research findings to support their motion to switch the venue, which is very unlikely to happen. And he said at the time yesterday, he said he would either he hoped to file it yesterday, or he would be filing it most likely today. And I didn't see anything come through the docket. However, another thing that they talked about doing was scheduling a special hearing to go over the motion to exclude Wendy's book, because Judge Everett wanted to go ahead and get that scheduled and get that taken care of. And that is actually, I saw, going to be tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's something to look forward to. You can read about that. And just continuing to look through the docket to see, if Everett will release an order on the motion in limine to keep the dissolution of marriage, the divorce file out, and some other things that are outstanding. And sort of we're looking forward to figuring out what the 7 new motion in limines will be from the defense. Obviously, probably something Robert Adelson related, and who knows what else. Seems like they're throwing a lot of stuff up against the wall. I've been thinking about what things could be. If anybody has some ideas, feel free to drop them in the chat. But it really is just, it seems like they'll go for anything. Okay, so here are the reasons why I think is quite possible that Jeff Lacasse was set up. And I don't mean set up in the way that I think that he was set up in terms of they really were trying to get him arrested, charged, and convicted of this murder. I do not think it was that intricate. I don't think it went that far. I think it very much would be something that, if all else fails, it would be something to point to sort of confuse investigators, muddy up the investigation, gives them someone else to blame, perhaps to, give them enough time to not focus on the family. I think a big part of, having potentially, maybe if a car was rented to look like Jeff's car, then I think that him driving away at the time of the murder, I think that it would just confuse them. So it would give the real hitman enough time to get away, right? And it could potentially lead to focus and efforts and resources being diverted away from the real killers and the real hitmen. So I think it was more of that and less of a plan to really plant evidence and try to get someone convicted that had nothing to do with this. So these are the 7 reasons, and I'll go over them in depth, and then we'll get a little bit into the third trip and the other trips. And this leads into the rental cars as well. That leads into why I think Jeff was set up, or potentially there was an effort made to confuse the situation and possibly give another suspect to look at. So the one is Wendy's relationship behavior with Jeff. There was a lot of yo-yoing. I was actually listening to Ed Talk from Mentor Lawyer, and he brought up a point that after all these years, I haven't really thought about or didn't think about too deeply because it kind of felt like an aha moment. But one of the things that they brought up is that why Wendy was potentially stringing Jeff along, with her going to Miami for 2 weeks. And, whatever, she didn't actually break up with him. And, one is, obviously my thought would be is that she wants to make him look sort of deranged and jealous and doing anything he can to get her back, and can look like just a lot of confusion on all parts. People are in a state of confusion, aren't the best witnesses, or aren't the best people to go in and provide information. So there was something about keeping a cloud over everybody, keeping that chaos theory going. But also, too, if the murder, there had been previous hit attempts, right? There was Nicholas Atteridge, I think, who was dead, but he was in the jail with Garcia and was friends with him. And he came forward, and there was something, its own mentor lawyer, Deep Dive True Crime, where he said that Garcia told him that there was a previous attempt where the hitman actually took the money and ran, right? So I don't know if that's true, or, there's no validity to that. It's never come into trials and or evidence in any sort of way, but it's something to note. But anyway, I forgot what I was going to say, but, it's just sort of if they weren't ever really going to break up, that they could Ed Talk brought up the fact that they could get back together, right? That she was keeping him strung along. She didn't know if the murder didn't go through or something happened. They weren't able to carry out the murder on the July trip. Wendy would still have someone to hang out with and go do things with. So she was keeping that option open. So that was something I was like, I never really thought of that. So the second point is sending Jeff out the night of June 4th. That would be the first hit attempt, going for Pepto. And as many people remember from Tamara's interview, I believe it was there, she had actually had dinner with Dan Markel the night of June 4th. She said that. So I think she pulled up her calendar or something. She confirmed that on June 4th, she was literally having dinner, Tamara Demko, with Dan Markel on what was supposed to be the night of the first hit attempt. Then there was the cancellation of the July trip that would have followed within the murder dates. So they were going to go to California to go meet his parents, and she canceled that on June 4th of all dates. Then there was Wendy's walk with Jane before the murder, and where she painted Jeff as being really jealous, which was convenient for Jane to bring up Jeff as a possible suspect, a jealous boyfriend, when she was in the room. There was planting the statement with Jeff days before the murder that Charlie actually looked into hiring a hitman the summer before in 2013. And there was confirming his travel plans after yoga, that he would, in fact, be leaving town at the same time that the murder actually took place. And then the rental cars, which will lead me into potentially the third trip that everyone suspects has happened. And I'll go into that. So let's get into it. So again, just kind of went over the yo-yo relationship that Wendy just sort of, I don't know if the relationship, I know it was almost a year. I don't know if it was a legit relationship. I don't know if Wendy sought out Jeff, always kind of keeping the back of the mind that this may happen. We know that the murder was planned for a very long time, or they were sort of working on it, because October in 2013 is when Charlie asked Catherine if she knew anyone that could rough up somebody. And, they probably were talking, the family was talking about it, if they were all in on it, as the state suspects, their theory of the case, then it's very likely that there was some talk about, Wendy looking at possibly having people that could be other suspects. And if that's true, then who knows if the relationship was truly real between Jeff and Wendy. I think it was, and that he became another useful idiot like Jane did. And that she kind of kept him along, knowing that, he could potentially be someone she could break up with, or, someone that she could show as being angry or jealous, and sort of was planting all these things, keeping her options open while kind of stringing him along. So there was the yo-yo. It's very weird, as Jeff points out, that he was just like, do you want to break up? Let's break up. We're adults. We've both been married before. We're not high schoolers. If you want to be in a relationship, but do you want to break up? Or, she would never give him a straight answer. It was really weird. And she was acting weird and seeing other people. And then she started talking about how he shouldn't get a Jeep Wrangler because it wouldn't be good for the kids, about how she wanted him to move in. All of a sudden she got very, changed the tune, wanted something to be very serious. She was going to talk to her parents about him. So she wanted the kids to start calling him dad. So she started doing all of that weird stuff. And then she would do stuff like go to Miami for 2 weeks, which was during Harvey's birthday, which is when she sent that text about Dan making sure he was going to be in Tallahassee those days of his murder, the 14th through the 18th. But so she was in Miami, and then she came back, saw him again. But then instead of just breaking up and having that weird yoga date, she actually, sent him that email saying she wanted another week of no contact. It's very weird. It's very yo-yo. It's not normal. It's not what adult people do in relationships in their 30s. So it's just something, it's something to note. It's just a very weird way to have a relationship and string someone on. That's very suspect to me. Okay, the second one is sending Jeff out the night of June 4th. So that was the June trip. That was the night Rivera said they were going to try to do it that night. And they had been following him during the day. So that night, well, let's just see what Jeff says. Let me play you this clip.
Ask you about June 4th, 2014. Do you recall an event that occurred that day that was unusual?
Yeah, I remember a couple of unusual occurrences on June 4th.
Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, I had met Miss Adelson at the Red Eye Coffee Shop in Midtown for a coffee about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We were going to talk about our relationship a little bit, and she canceled a trip we had planned to California to visit my parents, which was scheduled for July 11th to 17th.
All right. And was she acting strangely that night?
Yeah, that night, she was a nervous wreck, to the point, I couldn't put my finger on why at the time, to the point where she lived kind of way up Centerville, where there's no convenience stores or anything close, and I actually took about 35 minutes and drove to a convenience store to get her Pepto-Bismol because she was such a nervous wreck and had a real nervous stomach that evening.
Okay. And did she ever tell you what the problem was?
No, she's very non-specific about it.
All right. Were you aware during the...
Okay, so that was June 4th. They're at home with the kids, right? Dan Markel is out having dinner with Tamara Demko that night. The hitmen are in town, and they're in a silver blue Nissan, I believe, or Hyundai. We'll get into the details later. My memory is just as bad as Rivera, and I'll point to that later. But yeah, she sends him out yet again. It could be totally coincidence, but the hitmen are there. It's at the time of the murder, and he's out in his car, at the same time, running around in a car that is very similar to what the hitmen are in Tallahassee driving. Coincidence? I don't know. But it does show very odd behavior that he found to be very odd. He didn't have a reason, but she was very nervous, very upset. Gives a good excuse for him to be out on the road and as a red herring potentially, and explains very unusual, unprecedented behavior by someone who may or may not know that a murder is going to be taking place. Something to think about. Okay, so that was a slide I just played. Okay, the other one, and got into a little bit that was Jeff at the 2019 trial, the first trial. But it's the cancellation of the July trip, the murder dates to meet his parents. And up here, I just threw up that schedule that was in evidence. Remember the stipulation that they had read, I think on behalf of John Lauro, wanted a stipulation read when he got up and addressed the court on behalf of Wendy at the trials. But here's the pickup schedule. If you look here, this is what it was going to be. This was the pickup schedule. And you see Wendy is down in Miami, and this is shortly before the murder on the July 6th. Harvey's birthday was the day before, so this is one day after their birthday party. You remember Dad's big present, and it's not paella. She writes, are you in Tallahassee July 14th through the 18th? I just want to know if I can have the kiddos on the 16th, right? So they're picked up by Wendy on the 16th. It's just very weird. He writes back to him, yes, you can. Yeah, I'm going to be there. So yeah, I mean, she's going to have him. That was the schedule. So But that's just weird. If you look here, I just want to read this, and I have one more video to play you. But this is the transcript of the March the 3rd interview, the controversial one of and this had always been out there. So a lot of people think there was something scandalous in the video, but it all had actually been out here and was able to be read. The parts that were edited out by Mentor Lawyer just for people's privacy and for whatever reason. But it's investigator Isom says July 11th through the 19th, you're supposed to go to California. Jeff, yeah. Isom, leave on the 11th, come back on the 19th. Jeff, I can look it up for you. It may be the 12th to the 19th, but it was the week that Danny was shot. Yes. Isom, okay. When is she saying I can't do it? What date? What date are we talking about when she's telling you I can't do it? Jeff, early June. Isom, early June. Jeff, early June. Yeah. Isom, so you're supposed to go to California with her, just you two. Jeff, we have plane tickets purchased. And she sat me down. I think it was on June 5th or the 7th. It was the 4th at the coffee shop. He says, I'll find it for you if you like. Yeah. Isom. Jeff. And she said, I can't do that. And it didn't make sense. It just didn't make sense. Isom. So she had already said that date, that window of Lacasse. She said, this is the 1 week I have to go see your parents. She said, this is the 1 week I have to go see your parents. And I said, Isom, the 11th through the 19th, Jeff. But that was in May. We booked them. Then we had a fight. I'll find out about Daniel Sack. And afterwards she says, I find out about Daniel Sack. And then afterwards she says, I feel uncomfortable with that. And she's just, hold on. She just had an appointment with her therapist. And she said, my main concern is that I want to be able to see the kids on that day, the day that Danny was shot. We had people volunteering to babysit if they needed to, if we were delayed, and we weren't going to be delayed. And she insisted it was not because she didn't want to go with me. She wanted to spend that week with me, but she just wanted to spend that week with me in Tallahassee. She did not want to leave Tallahassee that week. Isom, okay. Jeff. And then there's 3 different times. There's that time, then there's that staycation thing where I'm like, what are you talking about? That's bizarre. And then we scheduled the trip to St. Augustine. I'll fast forward a little bit. We had a trip to St. Augustine planned until July 15th or 16th, and she canceled that in the last second. So 3 different times she canceled plans with me in that 2 to 3 day period where Danny was shot. Isom, what are you leading us to this highly suspicious? So what you're leading to, I think this was a highly suspicious that she needed to be here on the 18th of July. Jeff, yeah, just anecdotally, subjectively, whatever it's worth, it was really weird. It was really strange. I know this woman. I know her really well. And there was something at the time. Me to my friends, what's going on? It's just really, really strange. It's just really investigator Isom. She never done anything like that before? Jeff, no. She had canceled and recanceled and did that all the time. Completely disorganized person. But it usually made sense. Usually she had a reason. Usually the reason was something about court with Danny, or her parents wanted her to come down to South Florida. Every other time, but this I understood. Every other time, but this I understood. This time I was completely puzzled, and it was very, very strange. Isom. Okay, so she cancels this trip to California. Did you go anyway? I did not, Jeff. Oh, of course you didn't. Lacasse. I wish I had. Isom. And so the 2 of you, what happens to these plane tickets? Jeff. Her ticket, I have no idea. Isom. She bought her own? Jeff, yeah, we bought separate plane tickets. As a matter of fact, I don't know that she did buy a plane ticket. Isom, oh, but she told me she did. Isom, same airline, same flight? Jeff, I can find it for you. I can send you my reservation because we had a discussion about getting our seats moved together. So I think she probably bought a ticket actually, but I never saw the ticket. Isom, it wasn't discussed any further? Jeff, I can't recall. Isom, okay, so that's the first thing in early June. She says, Jeff, I got to be back on that Friday, the 18th. Jeff, exactly. Isom, to pick up the kids. I guess that's gonna be the first of her week with the kids, maybe. Jeff, yes. She gets back after having because they went on a 7-day schedule in the summer. Isom, right. Jeff, she's like, I don't want to miss the kids. We'll be back. I said, if you don't want to go, just tell me you don't want to go. No, I want to go. I just got to be back for the kids. There was a special Isom. Okay, why not just the flight or just the Jeff? I don't know. Well, she had this kids the previous week. This was her one free week. She's also booked all summer. Isom, well, the 18th is Friday. Look at Jeff. Yeah, it is. Isom, okay. So going backwards, the 11th she would have been Thursday, I'm thinking. Jeff, I can look it up. It just wasn't. She was booked by week throughout the summer. So he's just going over how odd it is. She goes on to say she's always in Miami. And so, yeah, so Jeff says, yeah, so 3 different occasions. This, at the time, it's what's going on with the 18th of July, the week of the 18th. What is this? I don't understand this. Isom, okay, so the first thing is this California trip, and it's Nick's. Yes. Then you want to take her to St. Augustine. She says no. Jeff, and she wants to stay. That's just bizarre. Isom, but did you ever make plans to go to St. Augustine? Yes. So a few weeks later, again, we sat in front of the calendar. It was really strange. It was this hesitancy that weekend. She says, oh, I'll go to St. Augustine, but we have to be back early Friday. Isom, early on Friday? Jeff, early on Friday. Isom, what does early on Friday mean? Jeff says, so we were going to wake up and come back straight back from St. Augustine. So we'd get up at 7, we'd be back by 9 or 10. Isom, okay. Jeff says she didn't have to pick up the kids from school until 4. It just didn't make sense. Isom, okay. Jeff, so I said, fine. My thing was I was going to drop her off and then drive to Atlanta. I was going to drop her off and go. So that was just strange. She's just stuck in my head. Like, what? Isom, is your trip to your friend up in Tennessee? So that was the date you're supposed to go? Jeff, I was supposed to leave at about 10 or 11 on Friday the 18th. Isom, okay. So we know what that day was. Okay, so next point. Wendy's walk with Jane before the murder and the planting of Jeff is really so jealous and unhinged. So here it is. So Jane, in my view, is a useful idiot. And I think that Wendy, again, was planting things in people's heads. She knows this is all coming down. She's very smart. She's very calculated. And it's my belief that she used Jane to go on this walk, even though she had laryngitis, to have this long talk. We're just getting over laryngitis. To have this long talk about planting all these problems, making Jeff look like a crazed fool who would be the ideal person to bring up in an event that something crazy had happened, someone who was kind of off the chain, right? So it was really off the chain Jane. But a useful idiot is a useful fool who is, and I don't think she's a fool, but I think maybe hopefully looking back she is, but I think she still aligns with Wendy and still sort of buys the Wendy story. It's a description of a person suggesting the person thinks they are fighting for a cause without fully comprehending the consequences of their action, and who does not realize that they're being manipulated by the cause's leaders or by other political players. And that it was, it's been attributed the phrase to Lenin. So it's some sort of a Russian espionage type term. And I think that's exactly what she was. So let's go into this and watch.
I'm gonna go make sure that I don't miss her.
Okay.
Like her husband, right?
This is Sarah, by the way.
Hi, Sarah. Are you a victim advocate? I am.
I said.
Did my live stream disappear? Where's the live stream? I don't see anything. Can you see something now? I'll check on my phone. Okay, it's good. All right, so go back to the.
You used to be a victim advocate, was I
That's
right?
not true. Yeah, I've done lots of stuff like that.
I recognize your name, and then she's saying.
What's your last name?
Latour. I've only been here about 2.5 years.
I am losing my shit.
Well, that would be appropriate. I think you should do that. I think if you don't do that, then that's not right.
Who would have done this?
I have just
And
one
are they
idea.
going to come after my kids? Or me? Who's next?
Is Jeff this much of a lunatic?
I didn't even think of Jeff. I hope to God not.
Can I ask who Jeff is?
Yeah, of
Yeah, I think
course.
you should. I think Wendy's been seeing a guy called Jeff,
Who's a friend of Jane's. And
who's jealous.
yeah.
Are you still currently seeing him, or just something you kind of
Well,
let taper off?
it's been a bad week.
Okay.
Yeah, Jane and I actually went for a walk together Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, early this week.
Earlier this week, but you've taken a 1 week break from
I took
Jeff.
a 1 week break from communication with Jeff to figure out what to do.
Okay.
Because we've been dating for like
A year.
9 months, so like 10 months a year.
And when you use the word dating to you, is that's my boyfriend, or is it more of just dating, like the casual? Okay.
No, like he was my boyfriend and involved with the kids, and I mean, yeah. And we had kind of a fight recently, and he's been trying to get back together, and I didn't know if I wanted to, and so he actually, the morning that I gave that talk, my boys were there and Jeff was watching them, so I could give the talk. Like he's, Jane, you think I have to tell them about him?
I think you have
guess.
to tell them about him because that is the only,
God forbid.
the only.
A big tell for me, I just caught it right now, is that she looks for Jane to get confirmation. It's just a little too much, right? It's a little too much. And it's very much, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, remember Donna's bond hearing, how she says, you know, when she was talking about going on the one-way ticket to Vietnam on a fast-track visa because it's a place of peace. Meanwhile, Harvey and Donna apparently went to Hawaii a lot as well, and that's a very peaceful place. I've been to it. It's fantastic. It's within the U.S. It feels far away, and it's very peaceful, and they enjoyed that as well, but they want to go to Vietnam. But you notice that what she does to kind of divert attention and make it seem like it's Harvey's idea. She said, my husband had this idea, and he said, you know, if we go, we won't be caught in the prisons. And so my husband, you know, thought it was good. So it was her husband's idea. So therefore, it was less her fault, less her doing, less her consciousness of guilt. And here I kind of see similar things where Wendy turns and goes, I should tell him about Jeff, right? Even after they've gone into all of this in front of the victim advocate, who is now going to be deposed, Sarah Latour. But it's just another thing that really sticks out for me here is this, who's next? That is so dramatic. That is so over the top. It feels so fake to me. Just woman's instinct. Just really don't buy it. Let's go back a little bit and watch it again. And also too, look how quickly when Jane goes, is Jeff this much of a lunatic? She turns right away. She goes right into it. Oh, and then you can see she says a series of statements that seem to come out a little too quickly.
I didn't even think of Jeff.
You did think of Jeff.
Is Jeff this much of a lunatic?
I didn't even think of Jeff. I hope to God not.
Can I ask who Jeff is?
Yeah, of
Yeah, I think
course.
you should. I think Wendy's been seeing a guy called Jeff,
Who's a friend of Jane's. And
who's jealous.
yeah.
Are you still currently seeing him, or just something you kind of
Well,
let taper off?
it's been a bad week.
Okay.
Yeah, Jane and I actually went for a walk together Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, early this week.
Earlier this week, but you've taken a 1 week break from
I took
Jeff.
a 1 week break from communication with Jeff to figure out what to do.
Okay.
Because we've been dating for like
A year.
9 months, so like 10 months a year.
And when you use the word dating to you, is that's my boyfriend, or is it more of just dating, like the casual? Okay.
No, like he was my boyfriend and involved with the kids and I mean, yeah. And we had kind of a fight recently, and he's been trying to get back together and I didn't know if I wanted to and so he actually the morning that I gave that talk, my boys were there and Jeff was watching them so I could give the talk. Like he's Jane, do you think I have to tell them about him?
I think you have to tell them about him because that is the only, the only thing that I can imagine related to you, related to Danny.
The only thing I could come up with was like his girlfriend Amy is recently divorced.
So, a couple comments that are really good that are coming in here. She just said Amy and the divorce. Mr. Markel's new successful woman and future perspective, I guess, in New York was her big competition, something they could not buy, not Tallahassee. It is, it seems like everything I know from Amy Adler, she's a very shy, very private person, and that is within her rights, and must have been terribly traumatic for her. And she's got a very famous brother, Jonathan Adler, who has just sold his company to a private equity firm. So they're rolling in it even more than they were. But she is high society. She's, I think I said this before, but I was reading an article on her and she was talked about, someone was writing an article about her. They went to go see her teach a class. And like part of her class it's about art law. So it's who owns art and art copyright. It's a very attractive, very provocative, a very high-end niche of law, where she takes her students to the NYU to the Met, for field trips. I mean, it's very high-end. And the attorneys that the Markels have, you may remember from Ruth's book, they are pro bono, the Markel's attorneys, because they did it for a favor it was Amy Adler, because she wanted the Markels to have the best representation. And Orrin Snyder and Matt Benjamin are the attorneys from Gibson and Dunn. And Orrin Snyder is Mark Zuckerberg's lawyer. He's the one, if you watch the Aaron Sorkin movie, I forgot what it's called, the Facebook one. They have all the scenes that they're in the conference room with the law firm and the Winklevoss twins. He was really their lawyer. And I think he's Bob Dylan's lawyer. I mean, he is, I think he got in a little trouble with Facebook, but fined or something or reprimanded, but he is the go-to guy. He's like the top of his game in New York, and he's representing the Markels pro bono. And he's doing that as a favor to Amy Adler. So that's pretty huge. And that speaks volumes. And she, she's very successful. She apparently, I think Dan was the editor of whatever law review at Harvard. She held the same position at Yale. She went to Yale Law. So it really she was his caliber. She was, she was really something. She is something. And that is a huge threat. She teaches in Chanel suits. She's a high class woman and rubbed elbows with the top of the caliber of where she was, and not to mention the high society that came with her brother, who's a famous designer, his partner is the guy who does the windows for Saks Fifth Avenue, like the designer for Christmas. It's just, they go to the best parties. They have this house on Shelter Island. It's a world that the Markel boys would be introduced to, that would make the icon look like a third world building, essentially, with third-rate people. There is that high society, and that was a huge, no doubt, a huge threat to Wendy. And we heard about how bothered Wendy was by this, because Tamara mentioned how bothered Wendy was. They would Skype from the bed, to the boys, and she went on and how she was so scared to meet Amy that first and only time, that her dad had to come to the door with her, Harvey, all sorts of indications. Even when she's in with Isom's, when she's in that interview, she's talking about Amy Adler and how she Googled him. She, had looked her up online, and she said, she's very beautiful. First thing she goes, she's 50. which is like the first thing to throw out, which is like, it's so off-putting and it's so out of context. And then she goes on to say, but she's very beautiful, and not that you can't be beautiful if you're 50. But it was just, she had to throw out something that was the least threatening to her immediately. And it's such a tell. It's such a tell how threatened she was by her. And so she probably still is. So, it's, and the fact that you can get like the best lawyers in the country, the top lawyers to represent people pro bono for a decade is no small favor. And they did that for her, for Amy Adler. So she was a huge threat. It was the lifestyle and they were getting very serious, and it would have opened so many doors and been so, it would have just, those Markel boys would have gone to New York or wherever, Dan was living, to go visit her, whatever relationship, and they would, rub elbows with all these people and then go back and hang out with eat lobster with Donna and Charlie. You know what I mean? It was a huge threat. So, it just, that to me, this is very choreographed. Who's next? Jane, who would do this? Like, Jane, give me names. Give me names, Jane. Who would do this? Oh, the fact that we just went on a walk a few days earlier where I told you someone was being so crazy and so jealous. Oh, I never thought of him. I mean, come on. Come on. Here's a good one. Jeff says she's incredibly disorganized, but she managed to move her whole house and life in one weekend without any forewarning. And the parents coincidentally moved into a larger, more expensive unit right before. That's a good point. T says, a year or so ago when I looked online, Jane was teaching at UGA in Athens. Yeah, and what's really funny is that she's married to a true crime writer. And it's something like, he's like, I forgot what it was, but he does something with bones. And so he had, like, in their backyard, Jane and her husband, he had this thing where he like had bodies that were decomposing. And I think he did research on, studied on, the decomposition of human bodies. But he's a true crime writer. He's written a lot of novels, Jane's husband. It's just a funny coincidence. But Jane is not the one that introduced Wendy and Jeff. So I don't know why she said that. It was a male that did. And Jeff admits that in his third interview. Exactly. Give her a little bone, right on cue. If Wendy does, Tenton says, if Wendy does have a trial, I'm definitely attending, and I'm buying or making a gray boat neck dress with black rickrack details. Yeah, Club Monaco. Okay. Yeah, just tuned in. Donna getting that traumatic gerbil water was ridiculous. Here comes the oxygen mask walking frame for court. Yeah, roll her in on a wheelchair, right? She'll go Durst, completely incapacitated. That was just it's exactly how I expected it to be, but just the shaking was great. I mean, it was like, ugh. Okay. One more good one. The Adelson Institute of Manipulation and Murder. On my Patreon, there's someone with a screen name of the Adelson Institute of Murder. That's their moniker. Jen says, Fancy, is the man Wendy was or is dating also an art or English literature professor? I can't recall. No, which is so funny. I'm going to have a picture of him later on. Stay tuned. I'll talk more about it. One more thing is that, it's Amy Adler plus Dan. T. Cancella says, Dan seeking sanctions that could threaten Wendy's bar card, or that could lead Wendy to deciding to risk murder was worth it. Convinced herself Jeff would go down. Adelson name untouchable. Yeah, it was $500,000, I believe. And it was in addition to it was like something that I think that was from Wendy's grandmother, and it was some inheritance, and it was not counted. But there was just something additional that had not even yet been filed. It was supposed to be filed. Amy Adler said it that day because it was in Isom's police report. He had called Amy Adler, and this was according to her and then another friend of Dan's, that it was he hadn't even filed what would have been the most damaging piece of evidence yet, which was the withholding money, which also brings into account where the Adelsons also was an incentive to do this, is to keep Dan and the forensic accounting out of the Adelson finances. But we don't have enough to really go down that rabbit hole. But that is just something else. There could be other reasons, in addition to moving the kids down to Miami and the divorce, that could have been motivations as well. Maybe not as big, but definitely there. Okay, the other one is, in addition to useful idiots and that kind of plant, there's a planning of the statement. Charlie looked into hiring a hitman, and it was real. And I've touched on this before, but I think, other people probably have too in their commentary, but I think this was was like an insurance policy for Wendy. And I think because she is smart, she's a lawyer, and she was doing a little bit of game theory, or trying to, and it backfired. But I think that you have to think about all the things that have gone wrong so far with planning this murder. There was potentially, which I'll talk about, there was a trip before the June trip, I believe. I think people now can kind of agree on, even though we don't know 100% confirmation, the details. And then there was the June trip, which didn't go through. And then if we believe that jailhouse informant who said that there was people who took the money, and this was according to something Garcia told him, so we don't know how good his information was. And if it was that good, I think Katie would have brought that up in her proffer. So this just could be someone coming forward with some misheard some information or twisted some. There's a game of telephone, but that there was a hit, but even before that the people took the money and ran. So there, and you even heard Lewis say that Sigfredo told him that Wendy was walking there the day before the murder. And I'm going to go into a lot of the memory issues that Rivera had between the different trips. So he could have just gotten it confused and seen Wendy on the June trip or another trip. But anyway, that the fact that, they want to make, Sigfredo said, Rivera said that Sigfredo told him that Wendy was walking down the street that day because she just wanted to make sure that he was going out of town and wanted to make sure that they were there and this was going to get done, right? So with all that being said, if something went wrong, and things have gone wrong before in this planning that we've heard, say that the hitman were seen by somebody, and identified. Say they hit another car and had an accident speeding away, and therefore were unsuccessfully able to flee the scene. Say that a cop just happened to be pulling away and they were able to pull them away minutes from doing the murder. Like, just who knows what could happen. There were so many variables that it was not, they were putting their trust into these hitman's hands. And we know that they were goofy and stupid and were doing drugs and doing all these other things. So I think as a very private, Wendy-only insurance policy, I think that is why she made this statement that Charlie looked into hiring a hitman. And I think she did it is because if everything came out on the table and something went wrong, she could go in and say, wow, it was my brother. It could be a he said, she said thing. And she would have Jeff coming up, backing her up, saying, she actually did tell me. Maybe she sensed something was happening because she actually did tell me something, that Charlie seriously was going to do this. And it's just a way that if it really came down to they were going to get caught, Wendy would have her account and someone else's account to back her up that this was done by Charlie without her knowing. That's just my, and it could be that she just was very nervous and had a habit of blurting things out, and it was just a mistake on her part. I think it actually was much more calculated. And when I think of how that could benefit Wendy, that statement, because it was her action, right? She made the move. She moved the piece by telling Jeff that. I think that it was an insurance policy, that she would have someone that she had confided in that she was very nervous and that Charlie was the one who was looking into things and would do something like this if it ever came back. And I think that another way, which I think is less plausible, is that, I think that, she could say, I told Jeff that because, and that is, if things progress and he ended up being more of a suspect and didn't have receipts from Kmart, or, wasn't away, didn't leave before he was supposed to, and he became a much more credible suspect, then I think that way she could say, well, I told him that. So I think breaking up with him, he thought, well, I'm going to do this for you, because I know that other people were going to do if your brother was looking to seriously, that was doing this for you and told you this, is this something you want done? And so I'm going to do this for you to like win your love or something. I don't know. That's the only thing I could think about. If she did say it on purpose and it wasn't an accident, how would she benefit? What's in it for her? And those are the only two ways that I could see it going down. If someone's got another good idea, drop it in the chat. But that is the only way I could see her benefiting from having shared that statement. So let's.
Told me that the previous summer, that Charlie had looked into having Danny killed by a hitman.
All right, so that would have been the summer of 2013.
Yes.
Okay, and when she told you this statement,
Her return to Tallahassee.
okay,
I just don't know if that's true. I don't know what day she actually got.
Okay, she represented. She'd been in South Florida, so you see her. So it's been a couple of weeks since the big fight.
Yes.
And where did you see her?
I talked on the phone in the interim, and long story short, decided to keep going, to not break up, to continue to pursue the relationship. So we had a date. I picked her up at her house and we went to the movies and dinner.
All right. And did you return back to her residence after your date?
I did. We did.
Was there anything unusual about her behavior that evening?
Well, she made a very strange statement to me at the house.
Tell us about that, please.
Yeah. So we're walking into the house and we're having chit chat, and she says, "Can I tell something to you confidentially?" And I said, "Sure." And she tells me that last summer, when the relocation got denied, Charlie investigated multiple ways to fix this problem of Danny Markel, including hiring a hitman, and that it was going to cost about $15,000. And I'm unsure if that number is 15,000 or 50,000, because they sound similar, but she told me that the previous summer, that Charlie had looked into having Danny killed by a hitman.
All right. So that would have been the summer of 2013.
Yes.
Okay. And when she told you this statement, you previously characterized the TV statement as a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Was this statement also in the characterization of a joke?
No, these are two discrete, completely different things. She had a joke she would make about a TV being cheaper than a hitman. I knew that joke. This was a separate statement. This was chilling. This wasn't funny. This made my stomach flip. I found it disturbing at the time. It's completely different.
And the statement was made 5 days before the murder of Dan Markel.
That's correct.
By a hitman.
That's right.
Yeah. So, what's that about? It was either she was nervous and blurted it out and it was a big slip of the tongue, which the stakes are so high. She's a lawyer. I know she's an emotional mess behind the scenes, but there had got to be a benefit for her to do that. It was not a benefit to her brother to do that. It's not a benefit to her family. It had to be a benefit to her with a statement like that. And those are the only two things I can think of. But I think it was an insurance policy in case something went wrong. Right? It must have been so nerve-wracking knowing this plan's going to go down, and you have these bumbling hitmen who didn't come and do it before, and she doesn't know how. Obviously, they're not academics, so it's a very high-risk situation. They could get caught in the act. You never know. She doesn't know. They could confess. They could go to the police and chicken out, and who knows? But she could always go back and say, I told people I knew my brother might be capable because he had done this, It's just, there's got to be a reason. And I think that points to Wendy being in on the plan. And I think it points to corroborate and back up Jeff potentially just being a red herring to help take heat off the family and the real suspects. So, oops. So here's a transcript with Isom and Jeff, where Jeff says, I mean, she was miserable here. She was just, because she came here with Dan. She was here just because she came here with Danny. She didn't like her job. She didn't like the area. She didn't like split custody. I don't know that people knew how upset she was. I mentioned to you before you came into the room when I said this, but this is the time period. I don't know the exact day. I'm so distracted by the relationship stuff. I can't quite remember. She told me that Charlie had looked into having Danny killed in the summer of 2013. She meant it dead serious. I wish to God I'd followed up on that at the time, trying to figure out, and I thought, well, I know he's crazy. I can imagine that, but certainly he's not crazy enough to do that. So I didn't worry about it. Isom, that's your Jeff. That's your interpretation, Jeff. It's not my Isom. No. Let's go back up. Lacasse, yeah, go ahead. Isom, let's get into the context of your conversation with her where that comes up about Charlie. Jeff says, she's talking about Danny. She's completely, where are you at? Isom says. Lacasse says, we're at her house in the living room in late June. Isom, in late June of 2013? Yeah, 2014, yeah. Isom, I'm sorry, 2014. Jeff, yeah, late June. And you know what? This might have been between June 20th and the Monday before Danny was shot. Isom, okay. And Jeff says, and all I want to say is right before, but I don't trust my memory on the date. She's talking about Danny because that's all she ever talked about. Danny wasn't a human being. He was Satan. Isom, he was what? Jeff, he was Satan. Isom, Satan. Okay. Jeff, yeah. What was really strange about this was that in January, February, March, they had a lot of court stuff, and I could see why she'd be so pissed off at Danny. Danny had calmed down. He liked this new girlfriend. The judge had read him the riot act in court, and they went to court the one time and told the attorney, you need to calm your client down and stop having your client write his own legal briefs. I'm sick of reading this crap. You know, Danny was going to get his butt handed to him by the court, and Wendy was going to have to concede a couple things, but she was going to win, everybody thought. And he calmed down. He really had. So I was trying to say we could talk about Danny a little less. Danny's chill. Danny's happy with Amy. This is good. This is good for us. You know, I was starting to see Danny a little more realistically at this point. So she's in the middle of this conversation, just ranting and raving about Danny, very angry with Danny. She's very sensitive. And the worst thing you can do for Wendy at this point is point out that she's not perfect. And that's what Danny presented to her, was that you're a liar, you know, things like that. Anyway, she comes out of the blue and said, well, I just wish something. I couldn't remember exactly what she said, but I was like, you know, this isn't going to ever be fixed in the way you want it. You're linked to this man for your life, you know. There's no fix for this. You have to fix what you think. And she said, well, you know, Charlie did look into having him killed last summer. She said it would cost about $15,000. Isom, $15,000? Jeff, that's correct. Seems cheap to me, but you would know better than that. Isom, I want to make sure I understand you completely. And Jeff says, please, please, please. So there's the first statement to Isom. Oh, there it is. Oop, sorry, my slides are going a little. Okay. 6 is confirming his plans after yoga. So on the right, that's Wendy's new beau. I mean, I can't confirm that they're together as of this date, but last I heard, this is him. I believe that I strongly believe, based on things that I've seen, that he is in Austin with her, and he is in tech. And I know a lot of rumors were started around that she, I'm not going to say his last name. His name's George, but there's rumors that he was a billionaire's son or something like that. I heard from someone close to the case that he was had Mexican royalty in his blood or something. But overall, seems like he's a pretty normal dude. Has 2 grown children, young adults, and that the kids call him dad, and that's them. So confirming his plans after yoga. So let's listen to that.
She, despite seemingly just breaking up with me and not wanting to see me for the next 3 days, had a deep interest in what I was going to be doing on Friday.
All right.
But if this one.
All right. I want to talk about the next day, which is going to be July 14th, 2014, the Monday before the murder. Did you see Wendy Adelson that day?
I did. I had left the previous night by saying I had some hope for the relationship. I said, if this won't work out, just send me a text, and I won't be offended by that, and we'll just move on. But she contacted me the next day and said, I really want to spend time with you. So then she canceled plans in the middle of the day, and then we went to yoga.
You went to a yoga class together?
We attended a yoga class together, the most awkward yoga session in history.
Okay. What happens after the awkward yoga session?
Well, during the yoga session, just as a 43-year-old man that's been in a few relationships, I'm thinking, okay, this looks like this is over. The vibe I was getting. We walked to the car and exchanged words, and she didn't want to spend time with me Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and she had the whole week off without the kids. And then there was a couple other words exchanged, but it was clear to me I thought it was over at that point. So I turned and started walking away.
Okay, and did she call you back?
Yeah, she called after me. I turned around and she asked me, are you still going to Tennessee on Friday? Because she had previously known that I was leaving for a trip to Tennessee at 11 a.m. on Friday, July 18th. And she had a series of questions about whether I was going. If I didn't go, why wouldn't I go? She, despite seemingly just breaking up with me and not wanting to see me for the next 3 days, had a deep interest in what I was going to be doing on Friday.
All right, and your plan at that time was to leave Tallahassee by plane or car?
By car at approximately 11 a.m. And Wendy Adelson and I had discussed that in some detail previously because of other plans that eventually got canceled. But she was the only person aware, other than the people in Tennessee, that that's when I was leaving.
And had you followed that plan, is it correct that you would have been departing Tallahassee and getting on I-10 at approximately the same time that the killers were?
Yes, not only that, but I would have driven within probably a couple miles of Dan Markell's house.
All right. And what type of vehicle would you have been in had you gone with that plan?
At that time, I was driving a 2004 four-door metallic gray Nissan Sentra.
All right. And are you familiar with the suspect vehicle in this case?
I am.
And would you characterize your vehicle as similar in appearance to that vehicle?
Yes, especially in profile, yes.
And are you aware that in her law enforcement interview, Wendy Adelson suggested you as a potential suspect?
I am aware of that.
And did you cooperate with the police in this case?
Yes. When I came back from Tennessee, they called me. I came in immediately and cooperated with them from the very beginning.
And were you able to provide an alibi that eliminated you as a suspect from committing this murder?
Yeah, pretty solid one. They had me on videotape at a Kmart in Tennessee a couple hours after the murder, using my credit card with my cell phone showing me there. So it was pretty good alibi.
And is that because you did not follow the plan to leave at 11 a.m. on July 18th?
That's right. I left the previous evening about between 6 and 8 p.m. I changed my plans. I didn't tell anybody except the people at the other end. I certainly didn't tell Wendy Adelson we weren't speaking. And so I was already out of the state by the time of the murder.
Mic drop.
I said I really want to spend time with you.
I mean, what a credible witness, right? I mean, I love that line that Georgia said in her closing, in one of her Dateline closing, where she said, you know, the evidence did show that Jeff was heartbroken, but unfortunate for them, for the defendant, his brain was working pretty good, which was so funny. That was such a good line. And it's true. What a good witness. I saw a comment somewhere. Someone left, I think on my channel or somewhere else, where someone wrote, does he even know that he's a true crime hero? Does he even know? Does Jeff even know that he's a true crime hero in the true crime world? He's a hero, which I thought was funny. So yeah, pretty odd. Why would she want to know where he was or what he was doing if she was like feeling very awkward, wouldn't answer him after he said he loved her and blew him off, and you know, had a very awkward, you know, like it just, why would she want to figure out what he's doing, where he's going, when? It's really weird. Unless she had an ulterior motive or it was just a coincidence. Okay, last one is rental cars. So we're going to get into, this is going to get us into the third trip that isn't talked about, but I want to point out all the places where it's referenced. The fact that there was a previous trip before the June and July trip we talked so much about. But the rental cars are similar to Jeff. And yes, I know that they're all different, and this may look like, you know, a lot of standard cars and could be a coincidence. But to the everyday person that's on the street who's seeing a car from behind driving away, they could all be described similarly. It's all the same, like, suspect car if you think about it. And it's, of course, they're not going to rent the same exact car, they're never going to get it exactly right. But it's just weird. It's just weird that they're all like silverish, they're all 4-door. And there's one thing, and there's two things I want to ask the help from the audience or the YouTube subscribers, if you're listening to this. There's two things I can't find, but I know that they're somewhere referenced. But I just scrubbed through so much I could never find it. The first thing is that somewhere Luis Rivera says that no one told him what car to rent. And I can kind of even see it where someone's asked him, did anyone tell you what kind of car to drive? And he's like, no, not even, or something like that. I can just like see it, but I don't know where it is. Where he says that he was not given any instructions about what kind of car to rent when he rented the Prius. And then there was another one where I know where it is, but I just have to go back and find the timestamp. It's in Wendy's interrogation or her interview, because Ison was buying it. It was not interrogation. But the interview, he comes in and he asks more about Jeff. And he sits down and he's like, what kind of cars he drive? And she was like, it's a silver something. She didn't say, she goes, it's 2-door, like that. And he goes, are you sure it's 2-door? Because I think he's already got a lead on it. It's a 4-door Prius, or he knows, are you sure it's 2-door? And she kind of sits back. She goes, yeah, I think it's two-door. I think that's a total reverse psychology thing. I think she's very well aware that he has a 4-door car because they've had discussions about what kind of car he would get. He couldn't get a Jeep Wrangler because that wouldn't be good for the kids. So she's got to know that he's got a 4-door car. There's a big difference when you have two little ones between having a 4-door and a 2-door. So I think that's something that she's using to push herself away from potentially framing him and making him seem innocent. When he asks about the car, she says that he has a 2-door when he actually has a 4-door. So there you see his car. And then the cars that were rented. And we'll go into a little bit more detail about this. But I thought what was really funny, well, we'll get into it. But yeah, it was a Prius. I don't think there's any 2-door Priuses. And I think that was why he literally leans in there and goes, are you sure it was he has a 2-door? And she's like, yeah, I think it's a 2-door. I just think that's so rehearsed. So, okay, next slide. Where we get into the trips. Well, before we get into the trips, another thing to point out is that if you look here, this is the Comfort Rent-A-Car Street View. And you can go back and you can look and see the dates of the Google Maps of what the inventory is. So if you go back, you don't get to pick what date. It's the date the little car went by. So the ones that it gives here is March 14th and March 15th. And you can look and you see, I do see a silver sedan there, but you see like a lot of white cars. And it's just, just what are the odds that they would get that car? So there's one silver car, but then there's a lot of other cars as well. And then if you look in the 2015, a year later, again, just, it's not like it's all silver cars. There were other options. And then this is the Save Gas hybrid auto rentals, the one where the Prius was rented. And you can just look there. I see a silver Prius back in the back for the 2014 Google images, and then 2015, you see there. So it's a coincidence, something to look at, a variable. Okay, and then, okay, so we're getting into the 3 trips here. So the first trip, strongly believe, and a lot of people do believe, that it was Garcia and Anthony Ortiz, who is now deceased. And that was on trip 1, right? And then somewhere in June, we know that early June that Garcia was recruited, and somehow Anthony Ortiz is out. Now, you may remember Anthony Ortiz is the one that, I believe he was living with Sigfredo, but he's the one that Katie called to get Garcia's new number because she couldn't get in touch with Sigfredo. And I'll show some documents. He was in the Latin Kings with Rivera, and I think he was a bit of like a second hand in command to Rivera. He alluded to something to that effect, is that he goes and runs errands for him. I think they called him El Hebrew, which I think means man of the people. And that and Katie called him. So Katie knows he's aware of his association with he's in their little group, and he is a Latin king, and they call him King Anthony. And he was really funny. So before we talk about that, let's just go and I'm going to show you that he is deceased. For whatever reason, we know Lewis and a bunch of his pals were picked up, and another one that was picked up is Christopher Israel or something like that. And he's got a whole funny backstory. He wanted to be a cop. But anyway, speaking of Anthony Ortiz, for some reason, was not picked up in these RICO. He was a Latin king. He was called King Anthony, and he somehow escaped being picked up in the big RICO sweep, right? And which is very interesting because he's calling Rivera. They're in touch all the time. So for some reason, he's not picked up, but he died in Rhode Island. He's a Miami guy, not a lot of money, hanging out with these two, and he dies in a motorcycle accident in Rhode Island, which is why he couldn't be a witness. He would be a great witness because he was there getting Sigfredo the morning of the money drop, right? He's all over the phone log. So let's go in and see what he's, well, first of all, let me go. And a lot of times too, also before we get into that, I think the reason why Lewis was recruited is because we know that, I think in like June 23rd, because I just rewatched the testimony where Tara Kwas has got Lewis on the stand, and she talks about how he had a baby born, and we know that with Jessica because they got evicted and they had a new baby when Jessica testified. But his new baby had a hole in the heart and was very sick and was in the hospital for a long time. And so part of me thinks that maybe either Anthony Ortiz chickened out and says, I don't want to do this murder because that one failed attempt freaked him out, or because Luis Rivera really needed the money because he had this new baby and potentially knew about some health problems coming on. So somehow Rivera took the reins and Anthony Ortiz did not go on any more trips. But let me just go and show you a little bit. I'm going to come back, but this is Anthony Ortiz. So this is actually a photo. If you look here, that's Anthony Ortiz on the left. I don't know who these other two people are. And there's Sigfredo, right? I found a picture of them. So they're hanging out, they're buddies. But if you look here, it says, reporting that a New Bedford died from his injuries suffered in a motorcycle crash Sunday morning in Rhode Island. It took place at 5:30 in the morning, and Anthony Ortiz, 47, and he was transported to the hospital and he died. So there's actually on YouTube, you can go and find, I found something.
Man is dead following a weekend motorcycle crash in Providence. An Eyewitness News viewer sent us this video shortly after the crash happened near the intersection of 95 and 146 early yesterday morning. State police tell us the rider, 47-year-old Anthony Cirillo Saldana Ortiz, died from his injuries at Rhode Island Hospital. Police are still investigating what happened.
So anyway, why is he in Rhode Island? Right? Isn't that weird? He's a Miami guy. South Beach. Here's another one. Hold on. And that was reported on July 10th, posted. Hold on one second. That was on July 10th.
Man is dead following
7 years ago. July 10th, 2017. So this was a year after Lewis was arrested. Right? I don't know when the RICO happened. I think it was 2015. Well, it was after 2014 because that's when the murder happened. So it was somewhere in there. But why? And part of me thinks he either fled and went somewhere different and was able to escape police, or he had turned a witness, a federal witness, and with some witness relocation. But it was very weird that he's in Rhode Island, so far away from Miami. He was a Latin king, King Anthony. And here's another little segment I found out about him on the web that just confirms that he did die in this motorcycle accident. Again, would have been a great witness. So here's just another picture of him, posted July 10th. That's his picture. He died, part of his injuries. early morning. Just odd. Why? R.I.P. Anthony, King Anthony. All right. Let me go back. So yeah, something happened. I think he went on that first trip. So let's just go back. Let's go see this is what Katie, let's first see what Rivera, this is back, Tara Kwas, I believe that this is the first trial in 2019. And this is what Rivera says about the third trip happening.
There was a third trip that didn't involve you.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Testified that there were only 2 trips in this case, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it true there was a third one?
I can't remember.
You can't remember, okay? Do you remember telling me in the deposition that there was a third trip that didn't involve you?
Oh yeah, I remember telling you that, but it wasn't me.
Okay, no, but you remember telling me that
I told you he probably came up here with somebody else.
Okay.
That's what I told you.
But you told us about that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and that, I think your words were he went up there with another king.
Yeah.
But you never mentioned that in any one of your other statements, correct?
Nobody asked me but you.
I asked you if there was a third trip, or you offered that information to me.
No, you asked me there was more trips.
Okay. So I'm going to refer you back to the deposition, okay, that you took with us in Arizona. State was there. You were swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Let's go to page 102. I have to just find the correct.
Our bottom of 103.
103, okay, thank you. Okay, 103, page lines 20 to 25. This is the first trip in June question, the witness. The first trip in June, the second trip, and the third trip. Every time we went up there, we was always coked up and drinking. You said that to us, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now let's talk about the day that you returned to Miami, which is the same day as the shooting.
Okay. So now let's see what Katie said, also kind of confirming there was a third trip.
Do you know if he
A whole bunch of guys too.
Right, and
I
also-
really think that.
a whole bunch of guys wasn't at Lewis's house? Did Sigfredo make another trip up here?
So using huh?
Did Sigfredo make a third trip? Do you know if he made one before the June? Did he come up before June?
Not that I can recall, but probably.
Not that I can recall, but probably is a yes for Katie. That means yes in Katie language.
Did Sigfredo make another trip up here?
So using huh?
Did Sigfredo make a third trip? Do you know if he made one before the June? Did he come up before June?
Not that I can recall, but probably. I don't know how many. He never told me when he would go out of town.
Did you ever
That was
have
the
to
thing.
go-
Being
Did you
out of
ever
town.
have to go get more money from Charlie prior to the murder?
I did lie about one time to Charlie. I was with Fredo. Me and him got back together, and then that's now that you said out of town, it was always out of town. So then that gave me an assumption that it wasn't in Miami. Like I have to get out of town. Anything he was gonna do, any type of business or whatever, is that he's going out of town.
So what'd you
That's-
lie about?
Oh, I lied I lied to Charlie about needing money for
For this?
but we ended up taking the kids out, like staying somewhere else, and then that was
So you lied about
that's
taking
not-
the money for this, but it was actually for you guys to go on vacation or
yeah, like we just like stayed somewhere, rented a hotel or whatever, like with the kids. So it was never like a trip.
But did you ever get money from him on a different time?
This is from Sigfredo?
No, from Charlie.
For another trip, like April or May or anything like that.
Did Sigfredo ever get money
Right now.
to do any kind of other stuff other than the June trip and then the murder? Was there any other time that you asked for money for him to do whatever preparations he needed to?
Yeah. No, I don't know. I'm not certain.
Okay, but that's what they're asking, is any other time that he needed money for preparation?
I'm thinking in my head that maybe it has happened, but I'm not for certain, so I
That is as close as a yes you're gonna get in Katie Magbanoa language. She's saying yes, but of course she can never fully just straight out and give a clear answer. This is her saying yes.
don't want to say. Yeah, because the Sigfredo has mentioned, times like, hey, I'm gonna need money. I need, to get out of town. Like he'd always just say, get out of town. Like when he said that, like that just triggered like
This is what
like
it's for.
something that he would say, out of town. I'd be like, oh, okay, and then I just relay it back. So it might have happened where there's another time before that.
Okay.
But I'm just not certain. I know I lied about that one time about him going out of town, but it wasn't really for that. Like we ended up going out with the kids and just used that money to go out with the kids.
She got back together with Sigfredo and used some of the hitman money to take the kids out. What a great mom. What a good person. Gosh. Oh, I saw something that caught my eye in that little break I was reading. I wanted to address it unless it's escaped me. It was something about it being interesting. Oh, yeah, TJ. It's interesting that she told Jeff not to get a Jeep, but in FBI surveillance footage, she's driving a Jeep. That's a red Jeep, if that's what you're talking about, where she's dropping off the kids. I have that video on my channel, and I've seen it a lot because I've watched it a couple times by uploading it, whatnot. They're referring, that's a boyfriend. That's someone that meets her in front of the school to make out. It's a red Jeep. I think it's Dave Attell because his kids went to the same school. And the FBI guy's like, you're in for a show. Yeah. So I think that she ended up dating a guy with a Jeep. Or, she said, was just friends. Just friends. Okay. Okay, so that's what they said about a third trip. So they're pretty much saying there was a trip beforehand. And so let's get into a little bit about some other evidence that backs up the third trip. So there's always just been this thing that it's in the probable cause affidavits for the arrest. So we've known about it since 2016. But then there was always this person that came forward that lived somewhere called the Ashford Club Apartments, and that is on Thomasville. And in between these apartments and Trescott, there's a ditch, drainage ditch. And it's literally that it's between, there's a drainage ditch, then there's Trescott, the home, then Trescott Drive, Dan's house, and then Trescott Drive, and then the Ashford Apartments, and then Thomasville Road. And it's really funny. I have a friend that does a lot of work and is very big in the Porsche community, and in particular restoring old Porsches, antique Porsches. And they've told me that there is a lawyer, and it's not criminal law, but does, I think, a lot of legislative stuff. And the guy's now retired, and he lives on Trescott, and he's in the Porsche community. And somehow it got, back the few people that I tell about this person is somebody that I tell about fancy fiction, this thing I'm doing, but not any detail. And he does not cover or watch me at all, but knows I'm from Tallahassee and knew this person was from Tallahassee. So there was a connection, and he told him about, about this murder, and that he has a friend that does this from Tallahassee. And this person in the Porsche community is a lawyer and actually sold him an antique Porsche, and they've been friends for a long time in the Porsche community. And he was telling me about this, and I got to see the Porsche that the lawyer from Tallahassee that lived on Trescott sold my friend that he restored. And he said to me, he's actually, he's in a big fight right now about that drainage ditch. There's a big thing with the city. He's going back and forth. So it's just a small world that I know that there's issues now with people in Trescott and that ditch. There's some flood or something that's going on. But anyway, there's a big drainage ditch, and then there's Ashford Club Apartments. And so there's a witness came forward, and I think nothing checked out and ended up not working out, because Luis Rivera ended up saying that he'd never got in the ditch and this incident didn't happen. Let me just read this to you, because it's always been a mystery, and it's always made me think that this person that came forward, this witness at the Ashford Club Apartments, maybe is getting confused and is referencing that third trip, because hey, who knows? That third trip with Ortiz could have just been the week before, and it just could be confusion. But this has always been stuck out like a sore thumb to me. And maybe the person that came forward, the resident of the Ashford Club Apartments, was getting dates confused. So it says in the investigation, this is straight out of the probable cause affidavits. It says, after the homicide was reported in the press, a resident of the Ashford Club Apartments at 2055 Thomasville Road reported seeing two men parked in a bluish silver Prius-type car in the southeast corner of the complex parking lot around mid-morning on one of the weekdays immediately before July 18th, 2014 homicide. The men got out of the vehicle and walked down a park path behind the apartment complex that parallels a large storm drainage ditch. This ditch is at the fenced rear property of the Markel home on Trescott Drive. The resident described the driver as a white male, tall and slender, with a runner's build, fair complexion, wearing a light-colored ball cap. The passenger was described as a shorter man with a stocky build and dark hair with a darker complexion resembling Italian or Spanish descent. When the two men returned to the car about 10 minutes later, the passenger was carrying an unknown black object in one hand. He was completely wet as he fell into the drainage ditch. The driver's pants appeared to be wet up to the knees. Sigfredo Garcia, Luis Rivera are similar to the physical descriptions given by the Ashford Club Apartments residents. Garcia is taller and slender, and Rivera is shorter and stockier with a darker complexion. As set forth below, the evidence establishes that they were in Tallahassee on the day of the murder and that they had rented a Silver Pine Mica Toyota Prius for the trip from South Florida. Both Garcia and Rivera are convicted felons in the state of Florida. So, maybe this person saw Ortiz and Rivera. It's just something to think about, since this incident has never been corroborated. Then here's another thing that was pointed out, and this is in a motion to continue filed on behalf of Katie's defense attorneys. where it references Anthony Ortiz in the third trip. It says here in this highlighted part, the Latin Kings are one of the largest and most well-organized gangs in the country. They operate in 39 states. The gang's primary source of income is generated through offenses related to the distribution of narcotics, assault, robbery, burglary, identity theft, distribution of firearms, and homicide. Luis Rivera has been the head of the North Miami tribe since the age of 15. Mr. Rivera denies the gang's involvement in this case, yet testified in a deposition at trial that Anthony Ortiz, King Anthony, took a third trip to Tallahassee with Sigfredo. Further, King Anthony is involved in a volley of phone calls minutes prior to the alleged meeting described above. So there it is in writing. Third trip, King Anthony. And then here are the calls. We see Anthony Ortiz, RIP, now deceased. Katie's calling him. He's calling Sigfredo. Louise is calling him. And, you really have to think if there really are involving anybody in a conspiracy or, a murder like this, or they're letting anyone know or calling anybody related to a money drop. A pretty safe person to call would be somebody who kind of already knows about it, right? Potentially he's taken another trip that's trusted, that they don't mind phone calls to. So it just something to think about. You wouldn't want to involve somebody, a sense of urgency for all these players to be getting in touch with each other the morning after the murder for a money drop, unless it's somebody that is already trusted as a gang member, but someone, it's even safer for all the parties to be having their phone calls and phone records to, that this someone is already kind of involved, right? Okay, here's something else. This is, I think, this is Christopher DeCoste and Craig Isom. It says, question, which would be from Katie's defense attorney. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is Isom and Rivera. I think this might be his proffer. Says, you go to the house, you already know where the house is. Do you all have to use the map to get to the house, or did you drive straight to the house? Or did he drive straight to the house? Answer, we drove. We was driving to come up to this house. We stopped one time. And again, man, I can't remember how to get to Tallahassee. I remember he grabbed a map real quick and then he said, okay, it's over here. Fuck it. I don't need this. He threw it away. Once we got over here, he went straight to the house. Question, you are saying to get to Tallahassee, you had to get a paper map? Answer, yeah, because he was drunk. He was like, man, I don't remember. So we stopped at a gas station. He bought a map real quick, looked at the map, and he was like, all right, I don't need it. Boom. I think he threw it in the glove compartment, like, all right, I know where we're at. And he just kept driving. As soon as we got down here, we went straight to his house. Question, so he didn't need any help getting to his house from the motel? He didn't have to pull the paper out no more, look at no addresses. He already knew everything. So this is Luis Rivera. You probably remember this point, saying kind of Sigfredo already knew where he was going. He didn't even need a map. It seemed like he kind of already had been here before. So just another incident to back up that third trip. And then here's back to King Anthony and Sigfredo. And okay, here's another really interesting, just a recap on the first trip and about these cars and setting up Lacasse. Is on the first trip, Garcia rented another silver four-door sedan on the second. And that same day, he got a ticket. And here's the ticket. And what I really want to think about is that even though Luis Rivera, somewhere, I couldn't find it, said that he was not told what kind of car to get, Luis Rivera got a lot of details wrong. He got the big things right. But who could expect a man who's got doesn't even have a middle school education, says he can't read, learned to read in jail. And he got caught 2 years after, when he started answering questions about this, this was something he said him and Sigfredo did not talk about. He pushed it in the back of his mind. It wasn't a topic of conversation that he ever addressed, routinely again. And he was asked all these detailed questions. And again, he also admitted that they were doing coke and smoking marijuana, and he got the 2 trips confused. And it was just, it's not something, it's not something, all these little details you can't expect to stick in someone's memory. He got a lot of details wrong. So I think it's very plausible. I want to show you that he got the details wrong about not being told to rent that a silver Fordan, a car that looked like Jeff Lacasse's car. So one of the things he got wrong is about this ticket. When he was giving his proffer, he thought he got the ticket in the Prius. But anyway, this is a separate ticket. This is Garcia's ticket that he got shortly after renting the car. And then on the same day he rented this car, and then he had to return it, which is very incriminating, because why do you need to rent a car? Because you got a speeding ticket. So if you look here, you can see the speeding ticket in this Tallahassee Democrat article. It says, prosecutors say the June trip was cut short when Miami rental car company found out that Garcia and Rivera were in Tallahassee. The car was rented for local use only. And it says Chief Assistant State Attorney Georgia Kappelman said the car company pinged the GPS on the car, and Rivera immediately turned around and headed back to Miami. So another thing, which is either that Garcia did not tell Rivera or Rivera didn't remember, the rental car company called Rivera. It's the same stupid thing as getting a speeding ticket in a car that you're renting to commit a murder and drive out of town, is that you rent for local use only. And then they call you like, why are you out of town? You're violating the contract. It just puts red flags up. And so Rivera, when he's asked 2 years later, says that he basically said, no, man, let's turn around. I don't feel like this. We couldn't find him. We didn't want to do it when the kids were around. There were a couple of reasons he gave why it didn't happen in June. But the real reason, I think that Garcia probably felt so stupid that he maybe didn't tell Rivera that he rented local use only. And the rental car company was calling him saying, get the car back in town. Why did you check this? If you're out of, we can see we've pinged you, which is very stupid. We wouldn't want to commit a murder when you've got a rental car that's already calling and saying, why are you in Tallahassee? You're trying to be discreet, right? So this is it. He rented a Nissan Altima Silver on that. That's the first one, the first car that he rented. And you can see down there, it says Waldo, the deposit. There was a Waldo. That was the name of the guy who testified. But you see, Georgia, this is, I think, in one of her closing statements, as transcript. Only an hour after renting the car, Sigfredo Garcia gets a ticket in the vehicle, ends up swapping it out for a different car the next day. Now, why would you swap out a car if he got a ticket? It's just really funny that in between getting a ticket on the June trip and then being called by the rental car company saying you're violating the contract, you're in Tallahassee, we know you're in Tallahassee, you're being called about it. It's 2 pretty good reasons that this is not going to be a successful trip, and it's time to turn around and go home. So just other things to think about. So again, Rivera's memory is really shaky. And so maybe he just doesn't remember being told what car to get. And this would lead into the fact that if there was instructions on that paper that was given, put in Catherine Magbanoa's, sealed in manila, open up in an envelope, put in Catherine Magbanoa's baby bag, that diaper bag, I think that it's quite possible saying, try to rent a car that's silver and 4-door, you know what I mean? And so if you look here, this is in the proffer where his attorney says, how do you know what kind of car he was driving? They're talking about Markel. It says, because Sigfredo told me the car. Sigfredo told you the car? He said that he's got a black Nissan. So we know that's not right because he had an Accord, right? And then Mr. Collins, when he said it was a Nissan, did he say it was a Nissan, or did he say it was a black 4-door car or 2-door? So he's basically saying, are you sure it's a Nissan, that he said Markel had a Nissan? And he said, no, he told me it was a 4-door Nissan. Okay. It was just like the car we had, but just in black. Okay. So we got that detail wrong. Then here, this is Christopher Lacasse and Isom. The question is, through your investigation on this case, you learned of a citation that was given in Gainesville, right? Correct. Now, at the time of the proffer, though, everybody was confused, thinking the citation was on the second trip, right, in July. Answer, I wasn't confused, but Rivera was. Then why didn't you ask him about the citation that he got driving up there? I did. Question, what did he say? He said he got the citation in the Prius driving up there. Question, on the second trip? Answer, correct. Another mistake? He was wrong about that. He was wrong about a lot of things, isn't he? He was wrong about the citation. So again, Rivera maybe just didn't remember he was told what kind of car to get. And then here's another one. Question, okay, who went with you when you rent the Prius? This is to Luis Rivera, if anyone. It was me and Garcia. He waited for me in the corner. I went in and gave $300 and rented the car. Question, okay, did you refer to Mr. Garcia as your brother? Always. So this is about the Prius. So Sigfredo, we know that Katie drove Sigfredo to go get the cars, but Sigfredo drove Garcia to go pick up the rental car. So it's very plausible that he said, hey man, get a silver car, get something silver 4-door, because he just completely forgot about it, right? It's just such a small thing. It's an easy thing to forget. And he's getting so many other details wrong. So I just think it's plausible that even though he said he wasn't asked, that he got it wrong. I think he also, at one point he was saying that the car in June they came up was black or dark or something. I don't know. It's a lot to ask someone to remember all these details. So I think it's very plausible that Jeff was set up and they were specifically each time renting these silver 4-door sedans on purpose, because it was instructions that were possibly given to them on that sheet of paper. And so that's it. There was a third trip. It was with King Anthony, RIP. And I think that it's quite plausible, more likely than not, that there was an attempt not to frame, as in get charged, but to muddy up the waters and give another plausible suspect, or at least somebody who would take resources and time from investigators to investigate, that would take the heat off the real suspects. And that was done as a conscious effort by the people who meticulously planned this murder. So that's it. Yes, he got a line with an owl. That's right. He got the line with the owl. And, I made the joke. I was talking to somebody about this, and they were like, oh, it's such a big mistake, the line with the owl. And, Leon High School is on Tennessee Street, and their mascot is a lion, Leo the lion. So it is possible that the mascot was still in their uniform and around town, and Lewis saw it and it looked very realistic, and therefore that's what he thought was a lion. But yeah, I just think Lewis did a lot of drugs. He committed a lot of crimes. He just kind of didn't, store all of these details in his hippocampus as something that was so memorable that he would be asked about 2 years later. And he's just kind of like, yeah, we did it. Here are the big points. You're asking me all these little details, whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't remember. It's not, why? It's just, we're asking too much of an illiterate man. I think he had his first child at like 15 or something and dropped out of school. He started being the leader of a gang at 15, he's not going to get everything right. So that's everything that I've been able to figure out and the things that I've thought about. There was a third trip. I think we've established that tonight in the presentation with the documents and receipts. And I think that there was definitely an effort by the family to work together to try to paint other people as possible suspects in an effort to deflect away from the real killers. All right, I'm just going to look at the chat really quick, and then I'm pretty tired. It's almost, Eastern Standard Time for you guys. It's almost 11, so a lot of people are. I rewatched the STS interview with Georgia from 2 years ago. Highly recommend watching it. She said Wendy's Al shirt and a picture of Al was something that she definitely noticed. Yeah. I don't even know what day it is. Remember when Catherine McBano says, I don't even remember what I did yesterday. Girl, you've been in jail for 2 years. You haven't been doing anything. Stop acting like you've got this, like, all these activities in your life that you can't keep things straight. Yeah, I think so. I think he just has a fried brain and he's tired of talking about it. All right, everybody. I'm sorry I ignored the chat for most of the night, but I had to get through all these details. And yeah, tomorrow, just as a reminder, tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Florida time, they're going to be having, I don't know if it will be, hopefully it will be, it's last minute, so I hope the cameras will be there and that they'll broadcast it, but they're going to be going over the motion to keep Wendy's book out of the trial, which, you know, I hope it is NFSU, right? Hiawassee Springs, Josh Stone. I hope it is. It's very relevant in my view. All right, everybody. Well, good night. Have a great day. See you soon. Bye.